Hi, everyone. Mike White here. Welcome to this week's vlog post. All the signs that we're seeing, or at least the data that I'm looking at and others that I follow, are really pushing us toward a recession. And, it's challenging because we no longer have a technical definition that is valid since the last two consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth, which at one time was the standard to declare a recession. The last time that it happened, people in high places decided that that was no longer the definition and have not yet replaced it with anything other than supposedly a group of people who will analyze the data, excuse me, over the next few years and let us know if the recession we had last year was actually a recession. The fact of the matter is it was two consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth, and that is something to be concerned about for sure. And I really don't want to get into the whole personal and political agenda that people have for why or why not things may be the way they are. But the reality that we're seeing, and you can put this in any way that you want, is the job market is slowing down. People are not finding jobs as quickly as they once did, certainly in many cases, not for the money that they thought they were going to get. Wage pressure is decreasing, and many people are fighting like hell not going back to the office. And they're willing to risk termination to not ever go back to the office, which again, that is, something to deal with as these companies realize that it's in their best interest that their employees come to a central spot to work and collaborate. And the people who've gotten used to not working, who feel like they're just as productive or more productive working from home, those things are going to clash. It'll fall out however it falls out. But the real problem is the job market is not what it once was. And we're starting to see things like continuing claims where people are falling off. We're seeing new claims for unemployment go higher, but we're seeing continuing claims remain stagnant, if not dipping. And the only thing that you can surmise from that is people are falling off unemployment and they're just not doing anything. They're not showing up anywhere. They're not. Maybe they're self-employed, maybe they're doing something else, but they're not showing up in the system. Maybe everybody's retiring, I don't know. But some other signs that point to some real issues, and I've talked about this a little bit last week, I'm going to continue to point it out because I am shocked that the Federal Reserve Board is not paying attention to more recent data, and they would see the writing on the wall. Vehicle repossessions are rising rapidly, and some banks and credit unions right now are paying very high premiums to repossession agents to move to the front of the line to go out and get the cars that they want back so that they can quickly turn them over, sell them, get them off their books, and clear them before the glut of used cars, repossessed cars, cars coming off leases, as well as those people who are trading in cars to dealers now that the new car supply is picking up. So it's really an issue that these car repossessions are continuing to climb. And a lot of it is pretty transparent. We sold an awful lot of cars. There was a lot of pressure on the markets. Used car prices went really high. And some of that had to do with the fact that people had money fall from the sky. There were all kinds of stimulus checks. There were all kinds of tax credits. There was all sorts of stuff that had people in, temporarily very high cash flow positions. And many of them went out and bought long-term obligations. Sound familiar with the bank failures, right? They borrowed money short-term, cheap, to sell into the long-term market. Short-term rates have risen, and they've got to pay the money back. And those short-term, those long-term low-interest loans are not enough to pay things off in these banks and places are upside down in their balance sheets. And we're seeing that happen with the individual population. They're not seeing that money. Those people were getting those stimulus checks on a regular basis. They were getting those child care tax credits, all that stuff. And now we're going to throw into it all the people who have not been paying student loans for years that are going to go back into repayment in August. And what's going to happen to their financial situation as they start making those payments? They're going to see further struggles. And you add that all in with the inflation that we've had over the last few years. And, I get it. It's a very challenging spot. So there's going to be a lot of tough choices made, and a lot of it is going to come back down to many individuals are not going to have that disposable income to be spending on other stuff. And that's what I'm concerned about is they lose those cars, they have to pay those loans, prices continue to rise. They don't have the money coming in that they were having coming in, and all the things that they had been paying for on a regular basis and things they were doing, they're not going to be able to do. So it certainly looks like there's going to be some pressure on the markets, and whether or not anybody will ever agree whether what's coming the end of this summer and into the fall is going to be a recession. For many people, it's sure as hell going to feel like it. And so it's really important that you pay attention to the signs and look at the data and keep yourself, aware. Now, for the mortgage side of that, that'll put pressure on rates. That'll put pressure for rates to go lower, and the Fed to stop hiking rates, at least, if not continue to pause or, God forbid, lower rates into the future, but certainly should stop them from raising rates any higher. And as the bond market reacts to that, as unfortunately more negative news comes across the wires, prices for bonds are going to be such that I think that we're going to slowly see, we may have already hit the peak of the mortgage interest rate market. If not, we're probably very shortly away from it. It's not as high, as I think it may get. We may see a couple of days of some volatility, but my opinion is I think if we're not at the peak, we're very close to the peak of where mortgage interest rates are going to be, at least for the short term, and then start a slow, gradual decline and probably find ourselves somewhere in the fives, at least, for a time. And again, it's hard to tell with what actions may happen. We're running into a presidential election year next year. Yeah, that again. So all these things, lots of stuff can happen. But the reality of this is, we've been dealing with a crazy, volatile mortgage interest rate market. There's a lot of data out there that supports the fact that inflation is receding, sharply, and it's going to continue to show that. When the Fed gets that memo and decides to change its language and let everybody know, the markets will calm down, the bond markets will improve. And again, if we're not already at the high, we're close to where we're going to be on the high. And I would expect a slow but steady move lower, somewhere into the fives, if all things play out the way that I see them. So with that, at least there's stuff for you to look at. There is some positives because there are people out there who didn't go deep into debt. There are people out there who don't have student loans. There are people out there who've been putting money aside for those student loans all along, and it's been part of their budget. All of these things may be true, and the vast majority of the people in this country, are not going to be severely impacted by what happens. But for those people who are going to be impacted, who were drinking the Kool-Aid and, really enjoying what seemed to be an endless supply of free money, the time to pay the piper is now. It's happening already and will throughout the end of this summer into fall. So just be aware. This may be bad news for some people that and it may be great news as mortgage rates go lower for those people who need to go out there and sell a house, buy a house, or buy their first home. So Any questions or comments, it's Mike at imtcoaching.com. We'll talk to you again next week. Take care.